on the Fringe with Dan RadioStyle. Hope everybody out there is having themselves a great day. The insurgency or counterinsurgency has truly begun. A lot of information has come up right now, and I think it's really leading in. It's a typical Sunday on the Q world, because usually right before heading into the Monday, we've got this kind of hint at what's going to be coming this week, and I think the attack is beginning. Now, of course, a lot of us know, the deep state is doing their version of attack. We all know what they're trying to do. They're trying to keep us locked down, trying to keep this COVID thing going, trying to keep us scared, and trying to make sure they can vote by mail, because it's the only chance they have to try to take back power. Now, one thing really important that's been brought up, and Bill Barr just did a rather long discussion on it. I'll share this link below, 48 minutes long. And I watched every bit of it. And a huge part of this was calling out a number of situations that revolve around China. The United States is getting very strong against China, calling out what's going on in China, and I think actually starting to put forth future plans that will sort of discuss or pave the way for how we're going to behave with China going forward. Now, I don't think it's saying too much that I think a bit of a Cold War, if you will, has started, and it might become a warmer war. I don't think it's going to become a hot war. I think there's a lot of efforts to try to keep this from getting out of control, but obviously the deep state is residing, at least in China. That was the plan, was to have China take control, have a war break out, China would win, we were done. As far as the Constitution and all those great things, that thing called freedom that we used to enjoy. Once communist China came rolling through our streets with that wonderful red star, and we would soon learn to love that and then secretly hate them. So this has been stopped for the most part. The election was taken. Trump, I think, at some point probably stepped up and said, is there anything I can do, because I'm realizing what's going on? Or they approached him, or either way. So a lot of things are happening in the world right now that are shifting the power. Now, what happens to the United States is what's kind of going to shape for a lot of other countries, certainly the Western world, if you will. The freedom of the United States matters probably more than anything right now in the world. Now, I'm not saying, screw everybody else, our freedom matters. No. But us waking up, us realizing that this is ours to have, our freedom to continue, or our kids and grandkids and future generations will never understand what it was like. Much like how we put animals in zoos so we can actually see what one looks like, because they're basically extinct thanks to humans. Now, some of the interesting things that Barr was calling out: Hollywood, pandering, some of the things they've done regarding movies that they pulled out the virus, the reference to Chinese creating the virus in World War Z was one thing he specifically called out that movie, and how they changed it from being a Chinese virus to being some other country's virus or some other kind of virus. Even a movie, they had reference to the Tibetan monks, and they changed that because they didn't want to cause issue with China. Calls out Hollywood, calls out all sorts of tech companies. And one thing that's very interesting on this, Twitter, Facebook, all these guys have presence in China. And China is basically saying, we want access to your records. Currently, right now, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, a few of them have said no. And what China's followed up with is, if you don't let us come in, that's against the law, and it's punishable by X, Y, and Z, which is death and all sorts of horrible things. So China is already threatening U.S. companies in China to give up their secrets, their information about us American people. Now, one thing right off the bat, folks, if you're storing stuff on the cloud, anywhere, Apple, anywhere, I don't care where it is, if you're storing personal information on the cloud, that will likely at some point end up in China. And once that ends up on Chinese servers, your information is for them to enjoy or do with as they may. Now, if you've got nothing to hide, like so many people say, great. If you've got a little bit to hide, I'd be really careful. Talked about businesses. Now, Trump just had a meeting Friday, a couple days ago, about the 200 CFOs, CEOs, everyone under the sun, EOs, all these major businesses, major corporations, major industries. And he was talking about how this economic plan, and I'm sure that was part of it. But I'll tell you what, the way things spun out through this weekend, the way this Bill Barr interview went out, the way some other things are being brought up, I'm pretty sure he also probably had a bit of a Chinese plan in the roadmap for what's going to happen there, whether people support Huawei or not. TikTok, all these applications, these companies, these products, all this new technology that they were planning on having China be a part of, and they're now saying, no, wait, no, not going to happen. He calls out how pharma and all the ingredients that pharma needs to make our pills. Now, we're the biggest producer, by the way, in the United States. We're creators of drugs. We're masters at coming up with things that you're sick with, and we'll come up with a drug to fix it. But guess who makes them all? Guess who's manufacturing the actual core ingredients of those drugs? China. So he called that out. Called out what's going on in the South China Sea. How literally China is bullying other countries. How China's using economic depression or economic loans, much like the big deep state, typical progress, to take control of other countries. They've got floating islands that have become militarized, that are floating in the South China Sea. There is a huge presence that China's trying to do. It's why we have a couple carrier groups down there, which is a rather large amount of stuff in that general area. A lot of firepower. A lot of firepower. So again, things are spilling up. Talking about patent theft. A lot of what China's got right now has been stolen from the United States. They've managed to skip years and generations of technologies by stealing from our country. There's so many people on the left right now that are so pro everything left, but most everybody on the left, these Pelosi's, these Bidens, all these people are bought and paid for by China. China owns most of the left. Some of the right, yes, but most of the left. So that has been a huge call out. So be really careful where you're storing your cloud data. And I'll tell you what, one advantage that China has over any company here in the United States is they don't have that pesky thing called competition, and you're not allowed to voice opposition because they just take care of you. They can make you go away, which going down the path of the left, if we follow the left, if we follow the crazy nut jobs that are trying to take us down the communist path, guess where our freedoms go? They go bye-bye. Guess where a lot of our lives are going to go? They go bye-bye. We're useless eaters to a large portion of the world. We use way more resources proportionately than any other populace on this planet. And the Western world in general, not so good. So the view on us, although rich and we spend gobs of money, we're not exactly the best stewards of where we're at. Again, I'm not trying to get political with this. I'm trying to call out some facts. There's 1 billion people in China. There's 1 billion people in India. And there's 300 and whatever odd million of us that just spend a lot of money. We don't do a whole lot more right now outside of that. We've got some intellectual stuff that's going on. As far as weapons, we make the best in the world. As far as drugs, apparently we make the best of those in the world as well. And we make some pretty good alcohol, but Germany, Russia, right, everyone can make alcohol, so who cares? Get to the Q posts, which do tie into where I've been. This isn't just a pointless tirade. It's, I think, what's going on. This is the assault that's happening right now. So 4594, pointing out that Meadows signals imminent indictments in Durham probe. It's time for people to go to jail. Direct quote. This guy's found all sorts of things wrong. It's time for people to go to jail as part of U.S. Attorney John Durham's probe into FBI misconduct. All sorts of things are popping up that are demonstrating problems. Obviously, Peter Strzok is going to be one of the people. His name keeps popping up. That's how these things work. Peter Strzok's going to be nailed. Maybe his girlfriend, but I know for sure this guy. This guy was in a position to make a difference. What's also interesting, this little section here, the Justice Department, or DOJ's, watchdog, has identified critical errors in every, it wasn't capitalized, but it's in a big word. It's an interesting word to use. This watchdog group has identified critical errors in every FBI wiretap application that it audited as part of the fallout from the Bureau's heavily flawed investigation into former Trump advisor Carter Page, who was surveilled during the campaign in part because of a largely discredited dossier funded by the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee, DNC, the infamous Steele dossier. Additionally, an ex-FBI lawyer in that case even falsified a CIA email submitted to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, the FISA court. The email, the infamous email where they changed it from saying was a CIA asset to wasn't a CIA asset or was not. I'm not sure. I haven't seen the exact verbiage, whether they used an apostrophe or actually spelled not out. But they changed an email and then filed that as additional information. So Barr has been doing a lot to try to stop this, to try to put an end to this. So, of course, they keep talking about this first document, right? The Steele dossier, the sub source, completely fraudulent. And again, this whole thing is beginning to take shape. They're beginning to attack. They're beginning to talk about actual indictments. For those of us that have been awake on this process for a long time, I'll tell you what, I'm still saying I'll believe it when I see it. I am not going to get excited beforehand. I'm not going to sound like the left did with Trump and say, oh, they're going down. No, I'll believe it when I see it. But there is major talk, major things being pointed out, and man, it seems like this is the direction we're going. Again, hard to believe. Gonna wait until I see some more stuff, but man, we are trudging down that path. 4595. Very interesting point that I think needs to be brought up. This has been brought up before in the past, and I have a funny feeling it's going to matter now, and they've talked frequently about how the future will prove the past, or the past will prove the future, really. But we've got a future marker here on 3537. They call it out as a future market, or future marker. And they're saying Ray is a sleeper. Now again, swamp runs deep. I feel like I missed a link here, but the swamp runs deep. And I think V2, typically V2, version 2, so version 2 change we can believe in. What makes me think what they're saying here is that when Ray finally comes out from behind the curtain and the sleeper portion starts to kick in and he starts to really do the stuff that I think we're hoping he's going to do, that would be V2. And that's change. And then now all of a sudden we're going to start to see things happen in the FBI. Again, is this going to be a big week? I think so. But the head of the FBI, Christopher Wray, has hired a new general counsel named Jason Jones, JJ. That's going to be fun to see those initials lying around everywhere, JJ. He's a partner with Rod Rosenstein in the law firm King and Spalding, which also employs Sally Yates. So again, is something coming out? Are they getting in bed with certain people? Are we in more trouble than we really realize? But again, they're calling out the whole, again, future marker, version 2, swamp runs deep. Are we actually getting in there? Are we starting to dig into that? Are we starting to put our tentacles in there or realign and start to put pressure on people? Start to maybe see what information they have? Again, the picture's being painted. They're choosing some beautiful colors. I can't wait to see what it looks like. It should be marvelous this time of year. 4596. Again, talking more Mark Meadows. And huge. Mark Meadows on Spygate. It's starting to unravel. No kidding. And there's a bunch to suggest that. And there's a lot of information that's been coming out. Mark Meadows did a big, long thing here on Spygate. It's all starting to unravel. I was going to play part of it. But again, playing stuff off of YouTube just generally doesn't work well for anybody with videos. And anyway, it's just not worth getting into. But I will put this link below. Check it out. It's fantastic. But we've got some other documentation that's going to cover what he was talking about. So if you're one that doesn't like to read, those pesky words, this link below will be great. Mark Meadows on Spygate. But there's also some great verbiage that's going to help us with this discussion as well. 4597, Donald Trump tweeting recently, today. So we catch Obama and Biden not to even mention the rest of their crew spying on my campaign, and nothing happens. Or he says it as a question, and nothing happens, right? You got to go up. I hope not. If it were the other way around, 50 years for treason, never forgets. Now, of course, he's bringing attention to this. Trump is always saying stuff on Twitter, don't get me wrong, but I think he's bringing attention to this for a very good reason. And of course, we've got this other link here. Swamp Runs Deep, version 2, 4595. Interesting. Now, what they are pointing out is the fact that these two things happened very closely to each other. They're saying 3 seconds, and it was, right? 1:14:30 and 1:14:33. So there's a 3-second difference on these two. Now, I love this. Come on, Dan. And I know he's not talking to me, but it's sure fun to think. It's like, sorry, guys. I'm sorry. Even though it's Dan Scavino, right? Dan Scavino. Links to the new Q drops, though. Of course, he posted it. Bam, right there. So, again, 0 delta, 3-second delta. Just saying. I'm not calling you out. I'm not one of the ones that calls you out on your grammar, by the way, Q. Okay? I suck at grammar and spelling, so don't worry about that. But come on. 3 seconds? That's not 0. Kidding, of course. Where we go, when we go all, that's the important thing. And, of course, he was referencing back to that original post. Catherine Herridge seems to come up a lot, really, and if you think about how funny it is that she recently moved from, where was she, Fox? And now she's at CBS. And CBS is kind of one of the ones that, well, one, still has a huge radio presence, oddly, but two, is sort of one of the unknown channels for news, on TV at least. I mean, I think they're probably, 3 or 4 or 5 or wherever. They fall in there somewhere. But she is... It's interesting that she moved from the #1 rated place, who is definitely hardcore deep state, and that's Fox, even though just for me, they're easier to listen to than CNN. But they're just as deep state. Anyway, all that being said, she's got some very interesting information, newly declassified records. Graham's been talking about this. I don't know if you guys have heard anything about Lindsey Graham, but he's been talking about the subsource, basically saying the Steele dossier was crap, was worthless. And by January 2017, they knew that the Steele dossier was crap. They knew it was. It was unsubstantiated. They talked to the subsource and even some of the other sources, and they couldn't validate, they couldn't verify, information wasn't correct. Now, initially, they gave Steele a lot of credit, and that's one of the things that's going to get pointed out here in a sec. They gave Steele a lot of credit because of his background. He was a British agent. He was British, and he had the accent, and he sounded intelligent, and he's always so smart. That dry sense of humor, that's a bad accent on my part. Doesn't matter. Steele had one too. But there was him, there was the fact that he supposedly knew people, he was working in that, blah, blah, blah. But once it finally all came together, once they realized the DNC was paying for it, once they realized Hillary was behind it, once they realized that they were actually using this after realizing it was proven false 3 additional times to get additional FISA warrants, they knew something was amiss. Now, all of this, of course, just to remind everybody, got started right after, the day after, in fact, Trump won the election. So before Trump ever took office, the Obama campaign, the Obama White House, began putting this whole thing in motion. And literally within one day, the FBI is in his office and they're starting to create the spin. They're starting to create what they're going to do. Brennan gets involved. All these people get involved. The truth is coming out. Now, what Herridge is referencing is a whole lot of stuff. And again, they're always like, follow the pen. At least they're making it easier and they're not putting 2 of them, because it was like everyone was thinking it was a clock. My guess is, because she's doing it here, I think she uses it to point. It might be my guess. Follow the pen. It's pointing. What's it pointing at? Well, here's what it's pointing. There's a lot of information in here. Most of it's kind of somewhat redundant over the past number of days. You've heard most of this. But the important thing that she's really calling out is this orange part here. Omitted Page's prior relationship with another U.S. government agency, despite being reminded by the other agency in June of 2017 prior to the filing of the final renewal application. About Page's past status with that other agency. So instead of including this information in the final renewal application, the OGC attorney altered an email, criminal, that person's definitely going to get called out, altered an email from other agencies so that the email stated that Page was not a source for the other agency, which the FBI affiant relied upon in signing the final renewal application. Falsified. So one, they had a crap source document where the subsource didn't even back up the story in the Steele dossier. And then on top of that, they omitted information that literally went to the contrary, that actually said the opposite of what they were trying to prove. So again, it didn't go with their narrative. And so the way this two-tiered justice system worked is, all right, it doesn't go with my narrative, we'll just fix the evidence and make it so. Now, one last thing that's pointed at with this pointing at an angle, I wonder what time it is. I don't think so. September 19, 2016 played a central and essential role in the FBI's and department's decision to seek the FISA order. So again, this whole thing that played out, this dossier, was a key part in how they moved forward. They gave this guy all sorts of credibility. So right off the bat, they got one of these FISA indictments early on. But the first application, so in October 2016, that was prior to them really knowing everything for sure. Even though by then, I think there was already evidence to suggest that the dossier was crap. We'll give them that one. We'll give them October. But there was 3 renewal applications that followed up in January, April, and June of 2017. Well after they already knew this dossier was crap. They did it 3 more times. The proof is out there. The facts are busting them. There's not a whole lot they can do to stop it. It's happening. It's being released by Barr, by Trump. It's being released. Post 4599 is very interesting. They're talking about a cool little movie that I think many of us are going to enjoy. And this right here, they're saying the first 3 versions of this movie are coming soon. You'll see that down below. But this is the first of 3. So let's paint a picture. Full movie here, but the start, right? This is the full story, I guess. I don't know what full means, but this is the start. The plot thickens. How the intelligence apparatus, the State Department and Department of Justice of the United States, in a joint effort with our primary foreign allies and other covert assets as directed by Obama Hussein or Hussein White House, in coordination with Hillary Rodham Clinton, colluded and conspired to rig the presidential election of 2016 in an effort to install Hillary to frame POTUS projection, right? So they created this emergency contingency regarding the installation of safeguards and firewalls to prevent the exposure or continuation of presidency should the counter fail to ensure operators, actors, agents of power, past and present, to make sure everybody can stay in control and use sources and covert assets, the fake news media, to carry out this barrage of strategic and coordinated attacks designed to divide us all. Now, again, this is all immediately post the election. They've come up with this crazy plan of how they can attack the president that just got elected, how they can go after anybody that likes him, how they can start to try to figure out a way to get Hillary back in. Basically, they're trying to justify the impeachment, the removal efforts they did, all the money they spent trying to prove he was guilty. And through all these, quote, treasonous acts, because that's really what it was. The attempt to remove a duly elected president is treason. And so that's the first story. They're giving us a little taste of this story. At least that's kind of how I read into it. So that's movies 1 through 3, the full list. Coming soon to a theater near you, of course. And then, of course, movie 2 coming this fall. So they're trying to give us a little bit of an outline here. So the first movie, very soon. Second movie coming right before the election. And the third movie is probably going to have something to do with how the new world is going to behave, or at least this post-deep state world that we're creating. And maybe it depends on whether or not we win. So, but enjoy the show is certainly the whole thing. And of course, I think we win for sure. That's kind of beside the point. Now, they referenced, why was I pulling those up? I was pulling them up based off the date. And I'm not sure. He references a date down here. 8/19/2018, August. And I went digging. And one thing they talked about, and this one's been shared a couple times. And again, I don't know if this ties in. It's just I went digging. I'm not going to read this entire slide, don't worry. But fascism, censorship, they have us define all this stuff, and then they kind of go through trying to explain how Antifa, fake news, and all these people are kind of trying to alter history, change the world, take advantage of us, project this whole 9 yards. All right. I mean, this is the insurrection. So they were defining it. So again, August 19, 2018. All right, what else? There was another one. There was 2 posts that day. And then they get into defining again subversion, the effect of subversion. White House seeks to impose tangible and significant consequences on those who commit serious human rights abuse. So getting back into what they were talking about just yesterday, Q was talking about all these posts for trafficking people and child abuse and Epstein and all this stuff, and Kevin Spacey, who I think is going to be another one that we're going to hear from this week. Wink, wink, nod, nod this week. So again, a lot of reference to some of these horrible things that happened, but I think maybe this is one of the important parts. There's going to be some FBI personnel removal. There's going to be some DOJ removal, some CIA removal, some state personnel, White House personnel, House personnel, Senate personnel, chair, CEO, VP removal. There's going to be military budgets, going to be some of the largest ever in history for reasons, and military presence around POTUS probably to try to keep him protected. And really the budget, one, our military got just horribly axed by our wonderful Hussein. But on top of that, that might very well kind of be the transition portion that transition us from the old economy to the new economy that some are suggesting we're on our way to. So the world is changing, and not only is it changing, it's changing quickly. And it really does look like this is a week where the insurgency or counter-insurgency is truly taking an offensive. I would not be surprised if we start hearing people, Spacey would be an example, Strzok would be another, where they've already got enough evidence and they can get that ball rolling and really start to get people to realize how serious these crimes actually are. It's not like where everyone just blamed Trump for being in bed with Russia. You just blame him, you make stuff up, it doesn't really matter. You just make things up and no big deal. Well, in the case of Strzok, and you make things up, you end up in jail. And that's what we're going to see. And I think it's really going to turn this on its face. It's really going to turn a lot of people looking at it and going, oh, this is legit. And that is, I think, going to begin to wake up a number of other people. Epstein was a start into something really gross, and they pretty much, I think they see it as supermodels being taken advantage of, right? Like people don't, I don't think, realize how dark this really goes. But it's getting that taste out there. But this next spot, this next one where we start busting some of these official people, maybe even Weiner, some of these people for the crimes that they've committed, and literally maybe even attribute treason to some of these people. Well, I think we're going to see things start to change in a very significant way. And I think the silent masses are going to begin to change how silent they actually are. I think there's a lot to rejoice. I think there's a lot to look out for this weekend. I really do. I think this week is going to be exciting, and I think we should pay attention to the nuances, but certainly there's going to be some very direct things coming for us. Some yummy gifts will be departed upon our doorsteps this coming week. Should be a lot of fun. If you get a chance, please subscribe to my channel. You hit the little bell icon for the notifications. Appreciate all that. You can share the videos, like the videos, and most importantly, watch the videos. Love each and every one of you. Where we go one, we go all. It's On the Fringe with Dan RadioStyle.